President for the Missouri State Conference of the NAACP. I reside in the city of St. Louis, and my Senator, Jamila Rashid, is present. I want to speak against both this bill and the resolution. As far as I'm concerned, one is a bullet, the other one is the gun. You know, it was ironic to hear the testimony earlier that talked about this bill would impact a small segment of the population. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see that we're prepared to debate, maybe approve a bill, spend millions of dollars, change our whole voting process and system, and train all these other folks just to deal with a handful of people in the state of Missouri that the sponsor just testified this bill will impact. And unfortunately, every study I've seen across the state says that handful of people are going to be impacted. Most of them look like me. In case you didn't notice, I happen to be black, or somebody Hispanic, or in some cases some seniors. The other thing I found interesting about the bill was it talked about this provisional voting, and they testified that the purpose of that is so you can sign, and then when they get the stuff back from the election board, they can compare the signatures. Well, last time I voted, in these polling places, they got a book that's got my signature in it already. So I guess we're saying that the folks we train to conduct our elections that have a book with my signature in it already don't have the skill at the polling place to look at a signature and compare the two and say I'm the same person, but that same person can then leave the polling place, go back to the election board, look at that signature there, and because he's at the election board versus the polling place, now he's a handwriting expert for some reason or another. The other thing I have a problem with the bill is that fraud. Let's talk about ID fraud. Now, I haven't seen any study that would document or let us know how many people are illegally getting hold of Missouri IDs that are fake IDs and using them. I don't even have any study that talks about people fraudulently using what you call them, the notary stamps and things like that. It would appear to me that if somebody wanted to commit some fraud just to vote, even if this bill passed, this wouldn't prevent it from happening. It just would increase fraud at the other end, where they would go out and steal some IDs and do some other stuff. Then there's one other big issue that we really have to discuss and think about, and that is the discussion that came up about the absentee ballot, because the wording that I read, it says, in all elections, however, provisional ballots should not be available for absentee voting. Well, military fighting for our country, they vote absentee. You have a permanent disabled absentee list in most cities and communities. Those folks vote absentee. If this bill was to pass as this language reads, as I see it, they would not be able to, they can't vote provisionally, because you can't vote absentee provisionally. Well, they vote absentee because they can't make it to the polls, so they're not there in person to present an ID. So we just took away the right to vote for anybody who cannot show up at the poll with a government ID. Everybody who normally vote absentee because they can't be there, because they're with the military, all this law here, as I read it, has disenfranchised all of them. All of them. You know, the bullet was aimed at, I think, my segment of the population, but it happens to be a bullet that's going to hit a lot of the unintended people, I think, based on the way the bill is written. So I really have another big problem with that. And then we sit here and just talked about making it possible for candidacy filing through the mail and through other means. Well, when they send that, is somebody going from Missouri the election going to go there and ask them for an ID? We've taken them at their word that they are who they claim to be. So that's my problem with the bill, Senator. And I won't take up any time, but we would love that other 30 minutes, brother.
Okay. Thank you. There's other people that drove here just like you did. I appreciate your leave and the people that did drive, several hours to pass by. Senator Dixon. Thank you.
You were talking about the book, the election board, the signatures in it. Maybe it's done differently than it is in my area. Are those in the book, or is the person signing when they are there?
You have to sign when you're there, but a copy of your signature, your registration and stuff, and at least in our jurisdiction, is there. And then in this particular instance, since we are moving to this e-books, that's at least in St. Louis, everything would be there electronically, signature and anything else you want to know about the individual.
I haven't worked as a poll judge, but I don't, at least in my area, I don't think there's a signature there in the book. I know we sign when we go through. I just thought it was different.
And in St. Louis, they do have it available.
Thank you.
Senator Kraus, thank you very much for your testimony. And it does concern me about absentee and those that are unable to make the polls personally. And I assume that you were referring to SB 511.
Yes.
Can you point out where you think that language is?
Section 115, 430, subsection 2,
What
page 7,
Page 7.
bottom paragraph. In all elections, however, provisional ballots should not be available for absentee voting.
And so you feel that language right there says that you could not do absentee?
It says that the only person who can vote provisionally or otherwise will be somebody who show up at the poll, present a government ID, and be allowed, and that way they'll be allowed to vote. It says absentee ballots cannot be provisional. And anybody who is not voting at the poll is voting absentee.
Mr. Chairman, would you mind if I ask the bill sponsor a question? Go ahead, Senator, is that the way you read that, or?
No, it's not doing away with the absentee voting. It's like I said earlier, they do an absentee ballot and they sign on the outside of the envelope. That's why, and there's nobody there to verify their photo anyways, unless they have it through a notary. And the notary is supposed to check their photo identification and validate who they are. But like he said, military, they don't have to have them notarized anyways.
And of course, like you said in testimony, there are a lot of people who are on that list.
Yes.
That mainly disabled or
Yes.
will get a ballot every time. So.
Yes.
I will go back through and make sure, I double check to make sure that we're not doing anything with the provisional or absentee voting. My understanding and the way I read it is not. We're leaving that into the law. We're just saying that there's no provisional ballots when you cast an absentee ballot.
Okay.
If I could respond there real quick, I think we all can read English. And the sentence says, in all elections, however, provisional ballots should not be available for absentee voting. It says you cannot show up to vote absentee, and if you do not have a photo ID, you cannot vote absentee. That's what this says. That's what this does. And the provisional section of this bill basically says that if you show up at the poll and you do not have a valid ID, you can vote provisionally. You sign an affidavit. According to this bill, you fill out an affidavit. There's 4 reasons on there why you do not have ID, such as money, all these other things. Then that affidavit allows you to vote. It goes back to the polling place, to your election board. And at the election board, if they can verify just by signature that it was you, then that vote can be casted. So even in that cases, that person voted without a valid ID. Only thing different was that they voted, their vote went back to the election board, and the election board compared their signatures and said this is who they are. So even if I was into fraud, and I was able to copy somebody's signature close enough, again, I can do what it is this bill is trying to prevent me from doing, because once it got vote provisionally, once it got to where it was, and the signatures were close, bam, my vote counts. But this language here says, in all elections, however, provisional ballots should not be available for absentee voting. And anybody that is not voting at the poll is voting absentee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Additional questions?
Seeing none,
Thank you much.
That's